There we go. Great. Well, welcome everyone. I am Colleen Del Vecchio. Today we're going to talk about finding a mentor or sponsor. This is definitely one of my favorite topics because I think both things are really important. So a couple things to get us started. One is kind of thinking about the difference between these two, right? I think quite often we interchange them a little bit, but for today, I really want to talk about this idea of mentors versus sponsors and figuring out like how do you find either one, right? And the easiest way that I always define it to folks is that mentors talk with you and sponsors talk about you, right? To me, that's like the easiest, quickest way to distinguish the difference between these two. And, you know, both are really important. Both are important at different phases of your career and kind of what's important when, as you're kind of starting off in your career, as you're moving up in your career, as you're at the C-suite, as you're top of your career, they're both really important. So let's just look at a couple of the differences here. So mentors, really, I always think of a mentor's role as, right, to kind of help people, identify their career goals, provide some career advice and guidance. Sometimes a mentor might be about a specific project or a specific task, right? Mentors don't need to be somebody who is quote unquote above you, right? I feel like mentors are much more multi-level. It could be that, fully admit, right? I'm 51. I would love a mentor these days, or I'm talking to a couple of people who I'm hoping one might be more mentoring for me around kind of search engine optimization and right, social media and that stuff. It's something that I can do, but it would take me an awfully long time to learn it all. So for me, sometimes those are the things, right? I see a lot of mentoring happening that goes in different directions, right? It's like I said, mentoring is not always somebody who's above. So often, mentors really have been seen in the past as someone who really helps you identify your career goals, right? They provide guidance. You might have a mentor for a specific problem or a specific area that you're trying to grow in. And mentors really can be anyone in any location. So, right, it doesn't, a mentor quite often is not even at your company that you work. Some companies will have formal mentoring programs where they will kind of be able to set you up with somebody, and it could be a mentor that you find that way, but mentors don't have to be. Mentors can be somebody from really any aspect of your life. Sponsor, on the other hand, and here I'm talking about sponsors in a right, in a career capacity. So sponsors really, right, as I said before, sponsors talk about you as opposed to a mentor who talks with you. So a sponsor, they talk about you because they use their political capital on your behalf, right? A sponsor's role really is, to kind of almost like advocating for you within the organization, right? Quite often for a sponsor, I always think of a sponsor as someone who's going to connect you to leaders in the organization, right? They're going to increase your visibility in the organization. Their job is to uplift you. And right, they do things like put your name forward for choice assignments, right? They really kind of work with you to kind of boost you within the organization, right? They really kind of demonstrate dedication to your career, right? They make sure that you get the training that you need, that you get the development you need within the organization. They will also usually more directly impact things like your salary, your long-term success, right? A sponsor really is someone who's going to boost you. And the big difference there between the mentor and sponsor is that sponsors really are within your organization, right? Occasionally you might have a sponsor within your field who might be able to do that for you, who isn't in your organization. But in general, sponsors tend to be within the organization that you are at. So before we start moving through kind of how to find these folks, how to like why some of these might be good, when you might want one versus the other, do folks have any questions about the differences between these? No. Okay.
Would you say, Colleen, that your mentor? I mean, you like you. I mean, you're a mentor to people, but you have mentors for different things going on in your life. You obviously want to do more business type thing and more have some more reach on the internet and that type of stuff.
Yeah. I find people have multiple mentors quite often,
Yeah.
right? That they don't just have one. Whereas a sponsor, you're typically going to only have one sponsor at a time, right? Because of kind of that work.
Hi, Colleen. I have a comment. I just think that the way I think about mentoring and sponsorship is that, a mentor is kind of the initial step. They're getting to know you, they're getting to find out about you. And then they might become a sponsor later on because they know something about you, because they can then talk about you in an intelligent and engaging way.
Mhm.
So I wondered what your thought was about that.
Absolutely. Though I will say, I don't think all mentors would come into being sponsors, right? I think some do, because some people still stay at that mentoring level, right? I think there's
Right.
a lot of folks who I would consider that I mentor at this point in my career. I probably have 5 or 6 people that I pretty regularly kind of touch base with and see myself as a mentor to them. Only one of which would I see myself as a sponsor. Mostly because for the other folks, I don't have the connections. I don't have the clout in the fields that they're in. Right. One of them is a product manager in a financial institution. Right. I know nothing about that, but I can be a really good mentor to kind of teach them the ropes of how they can kind of build their career and move up. I just don't have that ability to really truly open the doors for them. Right. I almost feel like sometimes, and I use this analogy sometimes too, is that, right, a mentor can show you which doors to knock on, right? A mentor will show you which of the doors you need to go through, whereas a sponsor can open the door for you. Right. But I think quite often people interchange these. I don't think we really have to, right. People don't need that title. So I don't think it's that important, but I think to know what you're looking for, right? If you are looking for a mentor or a sponsor, right? Are you looking for someone who can kind of help you kind of talk through your career path and help you think about what you need? Or do you really need someone who's going to be in there and really talk you up and open the door?
See, what you just said, Colleen, is something that really resonates with me because I think it was last year, somebody I used to work with, not directly with, but someone who I was acquainted with where I worked. We had a Zoom meeting like this, and he told me there was a book he told me to get that was something about a sponsor. And that was the first time I'd ever heard the term versus my whole life I've known what a mentor is, but not a sponsor. And I thought, wow, that actually exists for people. And so it's very interesting because I think I've had, as just in the most recent, probably 5 years or more ago, I had a mentor. She took me under her wing. She helped me create a cover letter, redo my resume, but I haven't spoken to her. So I find it's really interesting because I almost feel like I'm imposing on someone if I were to ask them to be a mentor or especially a sponsor. And I don't want to feel that way, but I would doubt that I'm not the only one who feels that way.
I agree with you, Kim. I feel I've been feeling for I'm a retired Navy guy, and I just feel like since I left the military, my career has stalled, and I feel like I'm doing things to and I'm sorry, I don't mean to. Bottom line is I feel like you, but I wanted to ask you, Kim. So I don't want to take away his time, but I wanted to ask you, Kim, what was the name of that book that they recommended?
Oh, yeah, you'd asked me that. I was trying to think of it. I can go and get it, but it's something. It says the word sponsor in the title. It's a blue book. I got it on Amazon, but I can go and get it during this, and I can put it in the chat thing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
Colin. Yeah.
No. This is one of those conversations that, right, I had a couple slides to kind of define what we were talking about, but it's really a good conversation today. And I think some of it, which Kim, kind of what you said, wanted me to jump into, is this idea of, right, asking people to be one, right? It feels weird. So my advice on this has always been that unless it's a formal program, right? There are some formal mentoring programs out there. Some really progressive companies have actually started like sponsorship programs that they really kind of talk that up with some particular groups. So I think there's a local hospital here that has a sponsorship program that is specifically for BIPOC employees, and then they have another sponsorship program specifically for women employees to kind of move them up the ranks. And those are, right, you get attached to a high level person, there's an interview process, right? There's a whole thing. But aside from those official programs, really for the rest of us, I always say, don't use those words when you're talking to people, because I think here's what happens is if somebody sends me an email and says, would you be my mentor? Right. And because I always feel like mentor is kind of the lower level one, right? A sponsor kind of takes it to another level. But if someone emails me and says, will you be my mentor? My initial reaction quite often is, oh, that's a heavy lift, right? And is this like a big brother, big sister program? Like, do I now have to be attached to Sean for the rest of his life? Right. Right. Like, because it feels like that when someone says, like, will you mentor me? And you're like, oh, okay.
Thanks, Colleen. Remind me not to ask you.
And I love you, Sean, but right. But I think there's this feeling that like, there's a responsibility level that I think a lot of people feel.
Right.
So, what I tend to tell people is when you're out there looking for a mentor or sponsor, you really want to find people that you just connect with. And right, nobody who's ever been my mentor, or, I think of somebody who I would see as kind of a sponsor-ish for me, right, as close to a sponsor that I've had in an organization. None of those folks were folks that I formally asked, because it wasn't a formal program. Instead, I built a relationship with them, and I think of one person who I have been mentoring for probably a decade now. And where kind of she and I have landed is pre-COVID, we used to meet for coffee every other month. Right. And there was no formal, will you be my mentor? I will be your mentor. I will teach you this. Right. But instead, it was every other month we'd meet for coffee and we'd be talking about her career and kind of what she's doing and how she's moving forward, and my thoughts on, she'd ask me questions like, how can I do better in this? And how do I learn? And that's great. Right. And I think that's how those relationships start. Anna, did you have something? Oh, sorry. It looked like, sorry. So quite often people will come to me and say, right, how do I find these folks? And like I said before, so sponsors in general tend to be within the organization that you're at, because, though you can have a sponsor who's somebody who's high up at in a field and in an industry and might be able to kind of move you along in that same way within that industry. But in general, your sponsor tends to be someone within your organization, because the idea of that sponsor, remember, is that they talk about you, they talk you up, they get you into the right rooms, right? They open the right doors for you. And that can be a little difficult to do in a different organization. Not 100%, but.
To your point, Colleen, and to answer Sean's question, I found the.
Okay.
Oh, find a sponsor. Look at that.
It's actually really good stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And sorry, Colleen, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all. I love that I love books that are very straightforward, right? We are going to teach you how to find a sponsor. So I think let's start with mentors, right? So how do you find a mentor? And I would say, right, to begin with, when you're starting to think about, what, I really need a mentor, think about what do you need a mentor for, right? So do you need a mentor who's going to generally kind of help you with your career, right? I think of this one person that I said, I feel like I'm a mentor to. We've never put that word on our relationship, but right, to me, it's a general career mentorship, right? We meet every other month, we get together, we have coffee, and we talk about what she's doing for work and where she wants to go next. And when we get back together, she's always like, hey, I tried the thing that you told me to do, and here's where I landed. Quite often we will talk about things like where are kind of the gaps for her to be able to move to the next level. I think of a young person who I've been a mentor to for years, who hands down is way smarter than I am, is smarter than I will ever be, will most likely be right, she's 26, I think now, and already has like a raging successful career. Right. But she touches base with me kind of about life stuff at this point, right? Like when she was in college, which was when I met her, and we were talking about what she might want to do next. And, she now kind of reaches out. She recently got engaged and said, okay, right, I have my mother, I have my friends, they all have way too emotions involved in this, right? Talk to me about, right, are these ideas crazy, right? So we kind of go in that realm. But for you to find someone, right, think about what it is that you're looking for, right? Are you looking for someone who can just bounce ideas off of? And I think some of this depends on what phase of your career you're in, right? So if you're just starting out in your career, usually you want someone who can kind of show you the path. Here are some ideas I have for you. Here are some of the things that we can do. Here's how to kind of get going, right? If you're mid-career, you're usually looking for someone who either you can talk about how are you dealing with some of this mid-career stuff, right? So it may be someone that you find a mentor who specifically you get to talk to about supervising others, right? Or maybe you're finding a mentor who is going to talk to you about, do you really truly need to go back to school to move up to the next level? I probably get, half of my coaching calls that I do are about people who are like, okay, so I've decided to go get my MBA, my law degree, like all of these things. And I always step back and say, okay, what if you didn't, right? Do you really want to spend, if you have unlimited money, you are have inherited millions of dollars, go get as many degrees as you want. For the rest of us in the world, I'm a big fan of, there are many ways to build skills, right? So maybe you're finding a mentor who can help you build those skills. And then if you're at the C-suite level, presidential level, right, the head of something, you want to find someone who's been where you are, who you can have that conversation with, right? People always say it's lonely at the top, and it really can be. Many of the folks who I coach who are C-suite level or president or executive director of something, and I even think of simple things like maybe you were just elected president of a board of like a small nonprofit, right? I think I recently was named president of a small nonprofit. We have 0.5 staff, right? We have a half-time executive director. Right? This is not a big thing, but it's being president of a nonprofit that's that small. Well, it's great to talk to the person who had done that role before, right? And to kind of get some mentoring from them, to get some advice from them, to get some kind of, what are some of the pitfalls that they saw? I also find that if you are someone who's in charge of things, sometimes it's really hard to talk to your peers where you are, right? To be able to say, gosh, I'm struggling with this, because you don't want people to hear that from you, or right, your own employees, right? I always think if you're the, president of a small company, or like I said, you got elected president of a board, you don't want to come in and be like, I really don't know what I'm doing, right? Thanks for putting your trust in me. I have no clue what I'm doing. So to be able to have somebody who's been where you are is great. So some of it is like, where do you find these people? More than once through the years have I gotten a connection on LinkedIn that someone says, you look really great, I'm looking for a mentor, right? Complete stranger. I don't know them from anyone, right? Maybe we have a connection, right? Maybe we have a third level connection, and they're like, will you mentor me? No, I won't mentor you. Or I've done this kind of presentation on kind of how to find a mentor with a lot of colleges. And I'll get college students who reach out and will be like, hey, will you mentor me? I'm like, did you even pay attention to one word that I said? Right? No, I'm not going to mentor a complete stranger. Unless, of course, it's a formal mentoring program, right? So if you want to find someone through a formal mentoring program, there are many of them out there. So your company might have them. I think, Sean, aren't you involved in some younger person's mentoring program? Do I remember seeing you posting something about that recently?
Yeah, I just became the board, a member of a board of the Marcy Marcy Housing Scholarship Fund, where like members of my family who grew up in Marcy projects in Brooklyn are, we put together a scholarship fund for kids to go to college and adults to return to college. As a matter of fact, we won some money from Allstate last year through a contest that they're doing. So that's pretty exciting.
Nice. Right. So there are some of these formal programs out there. So I've seen things like some chambers of commerce who do it, some professional organizations. I was part of a group that was called ACSN, the Alumni Career Services Network, for a few years when I worked in alumni relations. And we had a formal mentoring program that we did at our conference every year. So, right, you got to kind of speed date to find a mentor. So we would move kind of table to table and kind of talk. And then at the end, people would say, here are the people who I think would be a good mentor for me. And we would attach to each other, right? So there are formal programs like that. So if you're part of any professional organization, look into it and see if they have that. I've seen things like alumni associations who have set up mentoring programs. I'm a alum of Boston University, and we have a platform for the college that you can go in, and it particularly says one of the reasons for this platform is mentoring. So if people reach out to me and say, I'm looking for a mentor, this is what, but if they're going to say I'm looking for a mentor, what you need to say is I'm looking for a mentor for this specific thing, right? So I'm looking for a mentor to help me figure out my career. I'm looking for a mentor to help me through my first, I'm a project manager, and this is the first time I'm getting to do a Scrum focused project management, right? So you want to kind of say what you're looking for a mentor when you're kind of reaching out to anyone, but particularly in programs like that. Other places I've seen it, I've seen some chambers of commerce or like young professional associations who have done the same thing. They've kind of set up a mentoring program. So there are some formal programs out there that you can look for a mentor from.
Colleen, can I just add,
Yep.
if you're a member of SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers, or if you're a member of PMI, Project Management Institute, those are great organizations to be a part of. If you're looking for, how to, be better in project management or HR, to find mentors as well.
Absolutely. And like I said, some of these really do have kind of formal programs where they will actually connect you with someone, which is great. Now, quite often, you might not have that option. So you have to go out and find a mentor yourself. So, right, like I said, I think the first start is to reach out to people who you admire and say, would you be willing to hop on a Zoom with me, right? A 20-minute Zoom. I'd love to kind of chat with you about where you are in your career these days, right? And then when that's done, you follow up and say, this is great. I really enjoyed talking with you. Your advice was really helpful. Can I reach out again in a month or two and see if you can kind of continue that reach out and kind of set that up. So it doesn't have to be okay, right, Adam, will you be my mentor? It's more that we're going to kind of build a relationship, and we're naturally going to kind of become mentors. It's LinkedIn has made this easy to kind of connect with people in a way that, we weren't able to do in the past. I think with the past 2 years, right, people are definitely craving kind of connections that are not Zoom. So if you can find somebody local that you can feel safe with doing a outdoor coffee, right, for you Floridians and warm weather people, for those up in the bitter cold Northeast at the moment, you know, finding a place that is large enough that you feel like you could kind of sit across from someone and have coffee and feel safe with is great. And, you know, I think the other thing that's really important when you're looking for a mentor, and this is different from a sponsor, so this is mentors, right, is that you want to really find a person that you connect with and not worry so much about what their position is. Because, you know, it doesn't always have to be that person above you. It could be someone who's on the same level as you. It could be someone who, right, technically on the org chart is below you, right? You can have mentors who are doing different things. This kind of always makes me think of this idea of micro mentors, right? Many folks who I coach on a regular basis, I constantly encourage them to find what I would consider micro mentors. And a micro mentor to me, you know, is someone who's going to mentor you, that you're specifically looking for some mentorship for a short-term project. So this might be a situation that you're dealing with and you're looking for some advice. You know, you're looking to kind of connect with someone around that. It may be something on how to reach a career goal, or if you want to go back to school for something, or maybe it's a work-life balance question that you have, or right, advice on you're managing employees for the first time and you'd love to kind of chat with someone. So really find a person that you connect with and be able to have those conversations. You know, I think other places to meet mentors, I think any conference that you go to, right, with all of these Zoom conferences these days, I will say that when I leave a Zoom conference, before the conference, I always make sure that I post in LinkedIn or Facebook event, like wherever they're posting their event, I always post in there about how excited I am for the conference. Quite often I'll tag a speaker and say, right, you know, at Joan Murphy, like so excited to hear your talk on, right, the benefits of basket weaving on our mental health. And right, Joan's going to be like, great, can't wait to, you know, so excited, you're excited for my event, right? So we kind of, I throw things out there. After an event like that, I will follow up with speakers. I always, when things are in person, when I go to an event, I always make sure I introduce myself to the folks I get my name tag from, right? You don't go up to the table, just grab your name tag and walk away. You say hello, you connect with that person, because you know what? They know everybody's name who's at that conference, right? They have the list. Same thing with the people who organize these events. I always make sure that I introduce myself to those folks. And those are the folks that I always make sure to follow up with. Now, I might meet someone in the Zoom room that I'm like, ooh, right? Gosh, Adam, he was so interesting. I got to make sure that I shoot him a note after. But I would say half of my connection calls that I do, which I always try to do at least 2 a week. I aim for 3, but 2 is my minimum each week, that I have calls with people who, right, are not focused on something I'm getting paid to do. And I just want to have some of those connections. Now, that's because I love doing this. I know not everybody in the world, right? I think I have 2 daughters who are seniors in high school. Both of them would rather eat grass than, right, do this type of thing. Like, I don't see them doing this ever in their lives. But they also know how important it is to connect with folks. So maybe they're going to be the folks who say, you know what, once a month, I'm going to make sure I have a conversation with somebody who's not work focused. You know, if you've never done these things before, maybe it's once a quarter for you. But it's building up this group of people that you have that ability to reach out to for mentors. Anybody else, have you found a mentor before, or have, you know, connected with someone who you consider a mentor in a way that's different than this?
I think I just fell into finding mentors, like at a meeting, start connecting, and then kind of doing that touching base, a lot of follow-up. Like, I had a call this morning because it's somebody totally outside of my current organization wealth of knowledge. And I'm like, I'm looking for just some reality, some guidance in this, HR world. And I was coming from public sector and I'm now in private nonprofit. So there's some big differences for me. And so, I'm in that beginning phase of all of that, but it's just being in part of groups. So there's a Western Mass HRM group of SHRM. That's been a really good group to be in. I'm in human services now. There's an HSF forum. There's a forum for it. And that's really kind of where I'm starting.
Yeah.
For me, having mentorships is just kind of natural. Like I really rely on people for knowledge. Obviously, at this point in time, anyone can look up anything, but I always like to ask people what they think and connect with them. And that's really important to me. And then I think the other side is sort of, in a way, like, to have a mentor, you have to be a mentor, right? Because there's many people that can learn from you, from your expertise. So I really do enjoy the process. And I think probably the other side of it is just trying to get the sponsorship going, because I definitely could benefit from something like that in my current situation. Just making friends.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on what Kaisa just said, is right, that piece of be a mentor as well, right? Be willing to give as much as you get, right? Because if you're out there also providing mentorship, and again, it doesn't mean it's somebody, it can be someone who's starting out in their career. It could be somebody who's a career switcher, right? It could be that you throw up on LinkedIn, right? Hey, would love to have coffee with, virtual coffee with somebody next week who I haven't connected with in a while. Who's up for a chat, right? Or you reach out to a few people and say, would you be willing to hop on a call? If any of you are like me, I have a very large LinkedIn network, but probably a third of the folks on my LinkedIn network are people that I met at conferences through the years. And maybe I haven't talked to in 2 or 3 years. So go through your LinkedIn list and see who haven't you talked to in a while and connect with them. Because those connections, right, you have no idea who that, and particularly if there's something you're looking for. So let's say you're, really interested in finding more about the nonprofit sector, sort your LinkedIn list by people who work in nonprofit management and see if any of those folks, and be like, hey, would love to kind of catch up. Right. Again, I wouldn't say looking for a mentor, will you mentor me? But right, to say, let's catch up and have a conversation. Because I think that's going to get you there.
I think what you just said is what I can relate to, though, Colleen, because I've been battling this whenever I'm on a call like this. I love it because I get caught up in the words. And it's like, I think maybe my challenge has been, again, you've said it a number of times, how do you get someone in your corner without flat out asking for that? And there's one or maybe just two people I think of who would be great, I think, to take me under their wing, but I don't want to just flat out say, will you be my mentor? But I also would love to be someone else's mentor, because I've been there, done that professionally. And not so much about climbing up the ladder, but just I've had different experiences, ups and downs, and I can relate in a lot of ways. Anyway, so that's where my challenge is.
Yeah. It made me think of, I did a webinar for Boston University earlier, probably about a year ago now, that's on how to make cold connections, right? How to reach out to someone you don't know and how to get them to kind of have a conversation with you. So I just dropped that in the chat, because it's a BU alum event, but anybody can watch it. But I also think so when you just said, right, I had these experiences, I think it would be easy to throw up on LinkedIn and say, hey, right, just got off this great webinar about mentoring, or terrible webinar about mentoring, whatever you want to call it, but just got off this webinar about mentoring, and made me realize, right, I would love to mentor someone who is looking for some right? Mentorship, some advice around LOP, right? So maybe it's switching careers, maybe it's moving up, maybe it's managing staff, and say, anybody looking for a mentor in this area, happy to raise my hand for this. Now you have no idea, maybe no one will do it, right? If your college has some sort of mentoring platform, you can throw it up on there. If where you did your, if where you went to college, even their career center, you could reach out and say, hey, I'm willing to be a mentor if anyone's looking for, any students looking for this, if it's a small enough school, right? Like, you can't do that to like a UCF of the world where there's like 100,000 undergrads. They're going to be like, yes, of course, we're going to individually mentor you, or like match you. But on the other hand, if you're doing it at like Hollins College down in Roanoke, Virginia, right? They have under 1,000 students.
Well,
You
hello
email
again,
their
everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So I think that would work as well. So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah. Now I was just going to say to your point. I mean, I got my MBA at Bentley here, just west of Boston, and they have an outstanding career services department. So, and I have a really good rapport with a number of people in that office. So I think, I mean, what you just said, I might just reach out to them and say, hey, so thank you for putting that out there. Because yeah, I mean, these are just some simple things, I guess, that I just don't even think about, because I think I don't know what exists. I just don't think to ask someone flat out. So yeah, good idea.
and then I think to move to the sponsorship piece, right? So like I said before, in general, sponsors tend to be within the organization that you're at. They could be someone who's high up in your industry, who has enough clout within your industry that they could open the right doors for you in that same way as a sponsor. And so thinking about it that way. So if you're thinking about your own organization, think about where you're showing up in your organization. So I highly encourage folks to think about, is there a committee at your organization that you can join that some of the folks in these higher up positions are in? Now, not all organizations have these things, but I think of when I worked at Mercy Medical Center in Springfield for a while. I ran the volunteer and internship department for the hospital. And when I first got there, I was part of the directors team. There was 45 of us, great, right? All the directors were in a room together once a month, fabulous. But there was 45 of us. So literally you got in, you grabbed your coffee, and we started the meeting and ended, everyone ran back to their space, right? It wasn't a let's all kind of collaborate and talk. It was much more like, here are the high level issues the hospital's dealing with, how do we deal with them? So instead, I looked at all of the committees at the hospital and went to the person I reported to, who was the COO, and said, I'd like to join the emergency risk management team. And he's like, great, nobody ever wants to join that, right? Like, so look at the team that there's probably the most need for. I joined the quality risk management team. You know who sits in on that team, right? The head of the ER, the head of the operating room, right? The heads of all of the departments that could have a quality or risk issue. Now, I didn't bring too much to the table there, I must say, right? But I learned an awful lot. This was, I left that job 11 years ago. And at the time, we kept saying regularly, our biggest potential risk is a flu pandemic. And look at the world we were in. So, right, when you do that, right, I decided to show up for that. I know another person who I worked with who decided to be on the holiday party planning committee, right? Now, there wasn't a ton of higher up people on there, but there was the one that she wanted to connect with. So look and see who some of the folks are in your area. And I see your question, I'll get to that in 1 second. Right, think of the higher up folks that would be a good sponsor for you. Who are the people you want to impress and have kind of on your side, right? Or be the people who can kind of open a door for you and show up in the spaces that they're in. Right now, if you're at a place where you're like, okay, that's never going to happen, right? We have no committees that I know of, or right, you could ask human resources. Quite often, in a lot of companies I've been at, human resources is kind of the holder of those committees and kind of putting people on them. Some places I've worked had an annual kind of application process for those committees. So make sure you throw yourself out there to kind of be on one of these committees. But if not, then I would shoot an email to the person who you are hoping to be your sponsor, right? And say, gosh, right, Joan, I've always admired all the work that you do here at XYZ organization. You know, would love if you have time to do a 15-minute Zoom with you to just catch up and hear about your career and how you got where you are, right? Now, you're not asking for an hour of their time because most of these folks at that level are not going to have that. But if you can do that quick 15 minutes, make a connection, send a follow-up email, and right, here's hoping eventually we are all going back in person at some point, and then follow up in a month or so and say, could we grab a cup of coffee, right? You build these relationships. You don't just meet someone and they instantly become your sponsor, right? No one's going to meet you and all of a sudden be like, hey, let me nominate you for this high level position, right? It takes time and relationship building. So Joan asked the question about sorting your LinkedIn contacts. So let me pull up LinkedIn. I do have a paid version of LinkedIn. So, so I can show you how I do it, and I'm not sure. You should have the ability to basically sort them because I work with people on LinkedIn all the time. All right, so here's LinkedIn. Right, can everyone see my screen? Yeah, okay. So if on LinkedIn, I go to my network, I go to my connections. Right, and then I search with filters. So when I search with filters, if I click on all filters, it lets me go down to industry here. And on industry, so if we did this idea of nonprofit management, I'll use you, Joan, right, as we talked before, and I search for nonprofit management, it shows here are the 232 people who I know who nonprofit management is what they have listed as their industry. Does that work for folks? You know, I think the other thing on LinkedIn, if you're looking to kind of connect with people, you could always search by hashtag. So let's say you are all about career happiness right now. And so if you follow, you can follow the career happiness hashtag. There's a whole 39 people who follow said hashtag. But now I'm seeing everything that comes up where people put the hashtag of career happiness on it. So these are people who aren't going to show up in your feed usually, but you could read this. So Katie Tomlinson, she's a 3rd+ level connection for me. So I don't know her. And so I could read this and be like, wow, that really resonates with me. And I might comment on it, right? And then now I can start to make that connection with her. And if you watch that cold connection webinar, right, it talks about how you can then email someone from there and to kind of get them to have a phone conversation with you, to kind of talk to them. And maybe when you talk to them, you find you have this instant chemistry and you're able to kind of continue that conversation. But that's how kind of I use LinkedIn quite often. That as well as groups, which aren't as good as they used to be. It used to be LinkedIn on groups. If you were in a group with someone, you could message them. You could message everybody who is in your group instantly. That is not the case anymore. So. All right. You know, I will say, I think one thing that I always leave with is to make sure that people that you end up being a really good mentee if you're looking for a mentor, right? And that's why people will continue to want to kind of connect with you and mentor you or sponsor you. And being a good mentee means things like respecting the mentor's time, right? I had one young person who was trying to connect with me and had asked me to kind of do a bunch of work with them and didn't show up for 2 meetings in a row. Right? I'm done. I don't have, right? Unless something really truly happened and they weren't just, oops, I forgot, but I had 2 oops, I forgot. I don't have time to put aside for oops, I forgot. You know, making sure that you're prepared for your meetings with the person, right? Don't show up to a meeting that you're hoping someone's going to be a mentor for you, or that you say, you know, great, right? Iris, I'd love for us to connect and have a meeting. And then you show up and you're like, hi, how are you? And that's it, right? They're the only questions you have. Now, it doesn't have to be a peppered interview. It's not like you come with 106 questions, but make sure you have some things that you're going to ask and that they're appropriate. I was at a training recently and the speaker opened with putting us into groups and said, you know, I suggest instead of hi, how are you, you open with one of these 2 questions. And the first question was, what's swirling around in your head these days? Which I liked that. That was one that I went with. The other was, what are the lies you tell yourself? And I was like, whew, that feels really big for someone who I kind of maybe sort of know, right? Like it's a consulting job that I've been working at for about 9 months. And so I kind of know these folks. I've met none of them in person, right? I can't imagine, right? Adam, when we opened this today, to me like, hey, Adam, how are you? It's so great to meet you. So tell me, what are the lies you tell yourself? Really big. So what's swirling around in your head these days? That's, I think, a good question, right? Asking people if they're in the same field as you, you know, where do you think our field is going? Right? I think of things like human resources for Joan, right? Human resources is a completely different job than it was 20 years ago. Completely different. And it's different depending on which company you're at, right? Some places you do soup to nuts.
And it's different just from a year. Like,
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how quickly it's changing right now, which is good. No 2 days are ever the same. Sometimes no 10 minutes. So.
And so it's those things, right? I think those are good things. You know, a former colleague of mine who used to do training with students on finding a mentor used to always say, have strong beliefs weakly held, right? Have some strong beliefs that you believe in, but be willing to listen to a mentor and take their advice and be willing to change your mind, right? The reason you're asking for a mentor is for some help in that way. And, you know, really, truly be prepared and show up. And for a sponsor, right, it's almost like you have to be prepared times 10, right? These are the folks that are willing to kind of boost you up and put you up for promotions and move you up within an organization. So it almost takes that to the next level of be prepared, show up, really ask the right questions, make sure you are kind of connecting in a really professional way. Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop.